Hi, my name's Helen Mort. I'm a poet. I also write fiction and non-fiction as well. I've tried a bit of drama and radio drama, so a bit of everything really. And I live in Sheffield. I grew up in Chesterfield nearby, which is a small town outside of Sheffield. And a lot of my writing is to do with place and the landscape that I grew up in, really. My first collection was called Division Street, and that's named after a road in Sheffield. The picture on the front is from the miners' strike in the 1980s, which was kind of event in the area that I grew up that I feel like has had a really big legacy. So I wanted to write about that. I'm a fellow of the Royal Society of Literature, and I'm so proud to be part of that community, I guess, and to be in the company of other writers who I admire. But I'm here to talk a little bit today about a poet who isn't alive anymore, but who I believe should have been a fellow of the Royal Society of Literature within his lifetime. If I was going back in time and choosing people, he'd be my choice, because he's a writer who's been really influential and inspirational, I think, for me as a young writer, and then kind of all through my life. The poet that I'm thinking of is called Ken Smith, and he died quite a few years ago, sadly, when he was only age 64. But he was a writer from Yorkshire who moved around a lot in his childhood. So he spent his dad was a labourer, and so Ken spent his childhood just going from different schools across Yorkshire. And I think that's made him really interested in place, as I am, and in writing about personal experience and particularly the urban landscapes. There's a really nice quote from him that's always meant something to me as a writer. He said, "I like hanging around places like railway stations where you get the drama of departure and arrival. I sometimes consciously go out looking for images and language, like the city's a great big supermarket and you can pick and mix as you like." And I really like that sense of the world being yours to write about. And it doesn't matter how ordinary you might think what you're seeing is, it's about how you observe the stuff that's around you. When I started thinking about being a writer, as someone who'd always scribbled little notes and diaries and letters and poems since I was a kid, I really struggled with this idea that I didn't have anything very interesting to say, because I came from quite a small town in the kind of Midlands, north of England, and I wasn't sure what I could say about my surroundings and about my life that would be remarkable. I sort of had this idea that all literature had to be about sort of striking or unique experiences, and I didn't know what was interesting about Chesterfield, even though I felt that there was all kinds of rich imaginative stuff that I sort of saw every day. So it was reading poets like Carol Ann Duffy and Simon Armitage and Ken Smith that made me, I think, get a sense of permission that I could write about where I came from and that I could make those places interesting to other people. So I'm just going to read you a poem from my first book, which, as I say, is mostly set around Sheffield and Northeast Derbyshire, that I think owes quite a debt to Ken Smith. And then I'll tell you a little bit more about what I admire about his poems and set a sort of exercise or an invitation to write as well. But this is a poem about snow, and how even places that you're used to seeing all the time can become magical and unfamiliar and strange in different conditions and in different weathers. As you can probably tell, I like writing about weather too, though that might just be because it rains in Sheffield all the time. This poem's called Fur. Snow wants my childhood for itself. It wants to claim the blacksmith's arms, digest the Kalo fish bar whole. Snow's tongue has found the crevices of Eastwood Park. It licks the War Memorial, weighs down the trees, and everyone I knew is sinking past their knees. On Allpits Road, the family dog is swallowed neat. Snow gets beneath my school friends' clothes and touches them until they freeze. And still, it wants the long abandoned working men's club, hollows where bar stools scuffed the floor. It moves to fill each empty glass behind the bar. On Orchid Close, I stand to watch it fur the driveway of a man who's lived in the same bungalow for 30 years and dreams of digging his way out. So one of the first Ken Smith poems that I read that I found really exciting was this long poem that's all written in really short lines and is really energetic on the page, called Fox Running, and it's set in London, and it's about a character who's stepped outside of society and is kind of on the run through London, going to all these different places at night and observing all the lights and the shops and the scenes that he finds there. And I just found it absolutely mesmerizing, because he kind of imagines in the poem that this man, this character, this person is like a fox, and he can disappear in and out of the map itself and visit all the different tube stations and kind of disappear into the night. So it's sort of this great shape-shifting poem, and it made me think about the city really differently and see all the imaginative possibilities in it. And as I already said, Ken Smith loved writing about train stations as well, and places where there's that sense of movement. So what I'd love for you to do, if you want a writing prompt or a bit of inspiration, is kind of, well, there's two parts to it really, and of course you can pick and choose what you do. But I'd just like you to think of a place that you know really well. Maybe it's a walk that you do. It's like the walk to school. I can still imagine every little bit of the walk that I used to do to my secondary school from my house, if I stop and think about it now, and I haven't done it for decades. So you could either try and do that walk or visit that place in person and take a notebook with you, or you could just do it in your head. You could just think about that journey or that particular place that you know well, and try and jot down as many things that you notice as possible. And don't worry about trying to make it particularly poetic or try and make it unusual at this point, just getting down lots of details. So in that poem of mine, for instance, I use a lot of place names, a lot of street names that come from the area where I grew up, and they're all real place names. I think there's so much magic and so much beauty in those names, those ordinary names. And as I say, Division Street is actually the name of a road in Sheffield. So all those little things that you might not notice anymore, but that someone else might not know about, the sights, the smells, the sounds, the feelings that you get as you walk through that particular place, and the names and the bits of observation, and just jot down as much as you can, almost like free writing. And the second thing that I'd then invite you to do as a kind of writing prompt is to go back to that list or just pages of messy writing or whatever you've got, or those thoughts that you've gathered about that place, and then try to imagine it from a different perspective that's not your own. So for instance, in Fox Running, Ken Smith turns his character into a fox, and he looks at these familiar streets and familiar names and places in London through the eyes of an animal at night. What would happen if you looked at your familiar place from above, as if you were flying over it, for instance? Or what happens if you imagine that you're underneath the ground? Or what if you're actually part of the landscape rather than looking at it? Maybe you're in the fabric of the pavement, or you're in the trees, or you're a creature like the fox in Ken Smith's poem, and you're looking at it differently. So you're not yourself walking to school or going to the shops or going around town or whatever you do. You become something else. And just try and write from that perspective and see if it brings something different to your understanding of that place. But don't forget to keep those place names and keep those little details that make that place what it is to you. And use that as an imaginative landscape. I hope that you enjoy doing that. If you do, I know that for me, it was so helpful to have the permission from poets like Ken Smith to write about what I was familiar with and find the things that would make it interesting and strange. And yeah, it'd be great to read more poetry, I think, and more creative writing that does that. And I look forward to seeing some of that work in future years, hopefully from other RSL fellows and more. Thank you.